Night had fallen on the bustling Chicago International Airport, and the city lights were aglow, reflecting off the calm waters of Lake Michigan. Keanu Reeves, known for his enigmatic presence and ability to remain in the shadows of fame, was traveling incognito that evening, seeking to avoid the attention of the press. He was heading to a private meeting where he was expected to discuss current trends in film and art, as well as the personal values that influence the creative process. Despite his celebrity, Keanu preferred simplicity. His clothes did not attract extra glances. Jeans, a classic shirt, and a comfortable jacket, hiding a special amulet around his neck, given to him a long time ago by a close friend. This amulet, made of antique silver and decorated with mysterious engravings, was not just jewelry. For Keanu, it became a symbol of his life's journey, a reminder of moments when faith and perseverance helped him overcome difficulties. As soon as he entered the waiting room, an air of change and anticipation immediately enveloped the room. Among the passengers and employees of the airport, which included ordinary people striving for their goals and business travelers, Keanu stood out with his calm aura. However, his attention was immediately drawn to one service member, a control officer named Margaret Hensley, a woman with a stern gaze and an innate sense of order. Her gaze was fixed on the amulet hanging around the actor's neck, and she seemed clearly concerned. Margaret was brought up in a strict tradition where any display of personal beliefs or symbols that were perceived as offensive to generally accepted norms could not go unnoticed. Her job was to maintain order and adhere to all regulations, and any deviation was perceived as a threat to public peace. In her eyes, Keanu's amulet could be interpreted as a challenge to generally accepted norms, symbolizing something that she could not understand and accept. When the boarding call for the private flight to Los Angeles was announced, everyone present began to bustle around the exit. Keanu, accustomed to attention, remained unperturbed, striding confidently down the corridor, where his every movement spoke of inner strength and calm. But Margaret could no longer hide her displeasure. Approaching him with a formal, almost cold intonation, she began asking questions about the purpose of his trip and the right to wear such a symbol on board. "Mr. Reeves, could you explain why you have this amulet around your neck?" Margaret asked, her voice lacking in friendliness, but firm and categorical. Keanu paused for a moment, looking straight into the eyes of the employee. There was no malice or fear in his gaze, only a calm confidence based on many years of experience overcoming life's trials. He knew that behind every symbol there was a story, and today he had to tell his. "This amulet is a reminder of the path I have taken," he answered calmly, his voice deep and slightly melodic. "It carries the memory of those who helped me find the light in the darkest moments of my life." However, Keanu's words only strengthened Margaret's resolve. For her, such an explanation seemed insufficient and even provocative. She firmly insisted that all passengers and employees adhere to a neutral style, where personal symbols should not distract from the main order. Her words echoed throughout the waiting room, causing mixed emotions among those around her. At that moment, discussions began in the hall. Some passengers exchanged glances. Others tried to steer the conversation into a calmer direction. Keanu, realizing that the conflict could escalate into something more, decided not to give in to emotions, but to choose the path of dialogue. But inside him, there was already a growing confidence that this evening would change a lot, both for himself and for those who dared to judge people by their appearance and symbols. Margaret, gathering all her resolve, continued the conversation, while there were notes of severity and even alienation in her voice. She demanded not just an explanation, but a complete renunciation of the amulet in the name of compliance with the rules. Her gaze was cold and unwavering, as if she were trying to protect some sacred tradition in which she believed with all her heart. Meanwhile, Keanu, realizing that behind the external severity there was a deep internal struggle, answered calmly, but with the caveat that the symbolism of his amulet was not just decoration, but an entire philosophy embodied in material form. His words, filled with experience and life wisdom, slowly began to change the atmosphere in the hall, causing some passengers to question the established order. As the conversation was moving towards an open confrontation, a third participant appeared in the room, a young employee named Daniel, who, observing what was happening, decided to intervene in the conflict. His gaze was full of sympathy for Keanu, and he understood that sometimes personal traumas and prejudices are hidden behind strict measures. Daniel gently but firmly offered his opinion, calling on everyone to maintain humanity and respect for each person's personal choice. At this point, when the tension was at its peak, the announcement was made that boarding was about to close. The sense of impending inevitability added to the drama. The fate of the evening hung in the balance between traditional norms and the desire for freedom of expression. Keanu knew that this moment would be a turning point, and his inner world, so saturated with emotions, was about to be reflected in the actions of others. While Margaret continued to insist on her own way, Keanu accepted the challenge with dignity, leaving behind a subtle hint that true strength lies not in following rules, but in the ability to see the human stories behind them. A vague silence fell over the waiting room, in which everyone present began to realize that this evening was not just a transfer of passengers, but the beginning of a new chapter where symbols and personal beliefs can unite people rather than divide them. Thus began a story where every moment was filled with the expectation of change, where a seemingly simple symbol, an amulet that had deep meaning for one person, became a spark to ignite the inner fire of change in the hearts of those around them. And while the nighttime Chicago was preparing to give way to a new day, a story was being born in the waiting room that would forever change the idea of mutual respect, faith, and the true meaning of personal freedom. After a tense start at the airport, the situation on board the plane gradually took shape. In the confined space of the cabin, every emotion and every word took on special significance. The plane, slowly rising above the nighttime Chicago, became an arena for a clash of worldviews, where every detail that seemed insignificant under normal circumstances acquired weight and drama. After boarding and seating passengers in the confined space of the plane, the tension did not subside, but rather gained momentum. Keanu Reeves, who had already managed to earn the respect of some passengers with his calm determination, tried to find a balance between his inner calm and the inevitable need to defend his beliefs. His gaze, warm and at the same time penetrating, indicated that every word and every remark had a meaning for him that went beyond the ordinary conflict. His amulet, which he wore with such dignity, became a symbol not only of personal faith, but also of an inner strength capable of overcoming any obstacle. At this point, when the plane had already reached cruising altitude, the atmosphere in the cabin became almost tangible. Every movement, every word evoked responses in the hearts of the passengers. Margaret Hensley, who had maintained a cold sternness until this moment, gradually began to realize that her actions could entail unpredictable consequences. Her gaze, full of doubt and internal struggle, met Keanu's gaze several times. A gaze in which there was neither condemnation nor aggression, only a quiet request to understand the true value of the symbol. "Listen," Margaret began, her voice shaking with mixed emotions. "I understand that this amulet means a lot to you. But rules are rules. We need to maintain a certain order so as not to disturb the harmony in this space." Keanu slowly bowed his head and answered calmly but firmly, "I do not deny the importance of rules, but I ask you to understand that for me this symbol is not a challenge, but a reminder of what I had to go through. This amulet saved me in those moments when hope seemed lost. It is my memory of the people who helped me become who I am today." Keanu's words, spoken with such sincerity, evoked an unexpected response from several passengers. Some nodded quietly, others thoughtfully lowered their eyes, as if trying to penetrate the depth of his experiences. But not everyone could immediately accept this point of view. Whispers continued in the cabin, sometimes turning into open discussions, and the tension grew like steam about to spill out. Slowly but confidently, Margaret replied, trying to maintain her professional role, "I can see that this is not just decoration for you. But we have established standards, and it is my responsibility to ensure that they are observed. This is necessary in order to create a comfortable environment for all passengers, regardless of their views and beliefs." At that moment, the captain of the flight, Mr. Richardson, who is respected for his experience and ability to handle difficult situations with wisdom and balance, entered the cabin. His appearance inspired hope that the conflict could be resolved peacefully. He approached the conversation, his voice calm and confident, as if inviting everyone to forget about the initial severity and focus on finding a compromise. "Ladies and gentlemen," the captain said, "I ask everyone to remain calm. We understand that each of us has our own beliefs and values. Now is the time for dialogue, not confrontation. Keanu Reeves is a man with a wealth of life experience, and his story deserves respect. Let us try to understand each other, because at the end of the day, Our goal is to get to our destination safely, not to create unnecessary discord. Captain Richardson turned to Margaret, his gaze full of understanding and gentle severity at the same time. Margaret, I understand that you are responsible for the order in the salon, but perhaps it is worth considering that sometimes there is much more hidden behind the appearance than meets the eye. Let's try to find a compromise solution that will suit everyone. His words brought some relief, and the tension in the cabin began to subside gradually. However, the conflict was not resolved immediately. The emotions caused by the disagreement still hung in the air like a light fog, requiring dissipation. Keanu, sensing that his words had found a response in the hearts of some passengers, continued speaking, his voice softer, but at the same time filled with conviction. I ask you to look at this amulet not as a norm breaker, but as a part of my soul. Every scratch, every abrasion on it is a reminder of moments of trials and triumphs. It speaks of faith in ourselves and that even in the most difficult situations we can find support in ourselves and in those around us. Maybe this symbol will become a reminder for all of us that true wealth is not in rules, but in our ability to see human stories behind them. Keanu's words, spoken with such depth and sincerity, began to change the way people perceived what was happening. Several passengers turned to him with understanding, and some even expressed gratitude for him sharing a part of his life. Margaret, although she could not immediately fully accept the actor's words, felt a change begin to occur within her. Her internal conflict, born of the fear of disrupting the established order, gave way to the understanding that behind each symbol and each person there is a story filled with pain, joy, and life lessons. At this point, a new phase of confrontation began, not hostility, but a search for truth and mutual understanding. The conversation gradually turned into a dialogue format, where each side sought to convey its point of view without resorting to accusations and threats. The atmosphere in the cabin softened, giving way to a respectful exchange of opinions. Passengers, unwittingly drawn into this process, began to see the conflict not just as a clash of norms and beliefs, but as an opportunity for growth and rethinking of values. Amid all this, Captain Richardson remained vigilant, ready to intervene if the conflict threatened the safety of the flight. His confident gaze and calm manner served as a reminder that, despite disagreements, everyone was in the same space, where every life and every story mattered. The sky outside the windows gradually changed to the shades of dawn, symbolizing the beginning of a new day, a new era of understanding and forgiveness. This turning point in the journey became a symbol for many passengers that even in the most tense situations, you can find light if you dare to look inside yourself and recognize that each person carries with them a unique story. Thus, the second act of the story became the starting point for further events, where every detail, every dialogue, and every encounter mattered to those who were ready to hear the voice of truth. Keanu Reeves continued to be the center of this flow of emotions. His words and actions became a catalyst for change, giving everyone hope that even the most insurmountable barriers can be overcome if you are honest with yourself and open to others. As dawn broke over the vast sky beyond the windows, a new atmosphere entered the cabin. Warm rays of sunlight filtered through the glass panels, softly blurring the lines of tension that had previously arisen. Keanu Reeves sat by the window, his face calm and focused, his amulet still flickering softly around his neck, a symbol of strength and life experience. The casual murmur of conversation among the passengers was now replaced by quiet notes of mutual understanding and sincere glances. The focus of this new atmosphere was on Daniel, a young employee who seemed to be the voice of reason for many. He carefully approached a group of passengers who had been discussing the incident until that moment and began asking questions, trying to understand what exactly had caused such a violent reaction. His manner was calm but confident, and his genuine interest in each person allowed people to open up and share their experiences. I see that many of you have mixed feelings about what happened, Daniel began, addressing the small circle of interested passengers. This incident, although it began as a conflict, has given us the opportunity to see that behind every symbol and every action there is a whole story. What does freedom of expression and respect for the personal history of each of us mean to you? His words couldn't have come at a better time. One woman, dressed in a business suit, shared with a trembling voice memories of how as a child she had to hide her faith, fearing ridicule and judgment. Another passenger, an elderly man with tired eyes, told of how he lost loved ones due to misunderstanding and prejudice, and how he now believes that everyone deserves a second chance. These stories became living proof that the conflict that arose between Keanu and Margaret was not just a clash of opinions, but had deep roots in the personal experiences of each of them. Keanu, watching the proceedings, would occasionally chime in, his lines filled with wisdom and quiet calm. He would tell how the amulet he wore was given to him by his mother in moments of despair, and how this small object had become his stronghold in difficult times. His voice, quiet and measured, as if floating on the waves of time, touched the hearts of the listeners and made them think about how every object, every detail of our lives can hide a whole universe of feelings and memories. Meanwhile, Margaret Hensley, who had been trying to maintain her distance and sternness until this point, sat in the corner of the salon. Her gaze was directed at the window, where the first rays of the sun were reflected, and inside her, a real internal struggle was taking place. She understood that her actions had become a spark that had ignited the fire of misunderstanding, and at that moment she had to admit to herself that the rules she had so strictly defended could not always be absolute. It was at that moment that the realization was born in her heart that behind every human action there were personal trials and deep experiences. Suddenly, the cabin door swung open and a new passenger entered the cabin, a philosophy professor who had been invited to participate in a closed-door discussion on board. His name was Dr. Edward Blake, a man with many years of teaching experience and a deep understanding of the human soul. Dr. Blake was known for his ability to see the heart of a problem, and his presence added another layer of thought to an already eventful flight. Approaching the group, Dr. Blake began his speech. "Dear friends," he said, his voice deep and confident, "today we have witnessed not just a conflict, but a real clash of worldviews. Each of us carries within us pieces of the past, experience, faith, and hope. We are not here by chance, and every incident, every event, even at an altitude of several thousand meters, reminds us how important it is to maintain respect for each person. Today's incident is an opportunity for us all to reflect on how often we judge others without trying to understand their inner world." Dr. Blake continued his speech by drawing attention to Keanu's amulet, which became for him a symbol of the human spirit and its unbreakable nature. He spoke about ancient traditions where amulets and symbols played the role of protectors and keepers of wisdom, and how in the modern world these traditions continue to live in the hearts of people, despite external conventions. The passengers listened with open hearts, many of them feeling for the first time that even in such a seemingly ordinary situation as flying on an airplane, one can find deep meaning and lessons for life. The atmosphere in the cabin changed. Now the conversations became calmer, filled with mutual respect and a desire to understand, not judge. Daniel, Keanu, Dr. Blake. Each of them became a kind of bridge, connecting different worlds and views, allowing people to look at what was happening from a new perspective. Meanwhile, Margaret, gathering all her will, approached Kean. Her face was serious, but sincerity and remorse were already visible in it. She said quietly, "Keanu, I'm so sorry that my actions led to such a misunderstanding. I was too categorical and did not give myself the opportunity to see that behind this symbol there is a whole story, filled with pain and hope." Her words, spoken with a slight tremor, immediately found a response in the actor's heart. Keanu smiled softly and extended his hand as a sign of forgiveness. "Margaret, each of us learns from our mistakes. I understand that fear and prejudice can cloud our vision, but we are all here today to understand each other, and I am grateful to you for recognizing your mistake. Our differences make us unique, and that is where each of us finds our strength." Keanu's words were a quiet promise of change, a promise that even in the most difficult situations, a path to understanding and reconciliation could be found. With each passing moment, the atmosphere of mutual respect grew as people began to discuss the importance of not only following the rules, but also seeing the human stories, emotions, and dreams behind them. Dr. Blake and Daniel continued to encourage dialogue, inviting passengers to share their thoughts and memories. As the plane approached its destination, the conversations in the cabin became more and more profound. Each passenger found something personal in the exchange. Some realized for the first time the value of their beliefs, some realized that mistakes are part of the human experience, and some found the strength to forgive and forget. Even Margaret, who had recently believed that rules were sacred, began to realize that true strength lies in the ability to adapt and change. At this turning point, when the first rays of a new day illuminated the cabin, everyone present felt that this flight was not just a move from one city to another, but a real journey into the depths of human hearts. Keanu Reeves, with his unchanging wisdom and calm, became a symbol of this path, a path along which everyone can find their place, their truth, and, most importantly, the opportunity to be heard and understood. A new day brought with it the promise of change, and every passenger, regardless of age, religion, or life experience, took with them a piece of this story, a lesson about the importance of preserving humanity and believing in the best, despite all the trials of fate. The atmosphere that arose in the cabin became a quiet reminder that even in the most unexpected places, among strangers, you can find support and understanding if you only dare to open your heart. Thus, at a height where the boundaries between the past and the future dissolved in the rays of the morning sun, people realized each of us carries within us a whole universe of feelings and memories, and it is in this diversity that the true beauty of life lies. The plane, piercing the morning sky with rays of the sun, slowly descended to the landing strip of the Los Angeles airport, as if preparing for a new beginning, for a new day filled with changes and hope. At this moment, each passenger sitting in the cabin felt that the hours experienced at altitude were not just a series of random events, but a real test of the soul and a meeting with one's own internal contradictions. The atmosphere, saturated with emotions, left the feeling that each of those present had learned a lesson no less important than the purpose of the trip itself. Keanu Reeves sat by the window, watching the changing landscapes outside the porthole. His face, lit by the soft light of early morning, reflected the calm achieved after long hours of internal dialogue and open sharing of feelings. The amulet he wore around his neck seemed even more significant now, a symbol of faith that survives trials and grows stronger under the onslaught of life storms. For the actor, this amulet became not only a reminder of the past, but also a guide to the future, where each person has the right to their own expression and inner freedom. There was a new unity on board the plane. Margaret Hensley, who was sitting next to the aisle, could no longer hide the slight smile that was slowly but surely appearing on her face. After a sincere conversation with Keanu and a deep awareness of her own mistakes, she felt her soul being freed from the weight of prejudices and rigid frameworks imposed by society. Her look, full of remorse and a desire to change, spoke of the fact that every person is capable of sincere transformation, if only they open their heart to new ideas and people ready to support them on the path to inner harmony. The passengers seemed to have found a common language as the conversations in the cabin became fluid and friendly again. Strangers shared personal stories, recalling moments when their lives were changed by meeting people who could see beyond the surface to deeper meaning. Among them were young and old, people with different beliefs, but united by one goal: to find understanding and support. Conversations moved from formal greetings to frank stories about joys and sorrows, victories and defeats, about how important it is sometimes to simply be heard. At this point, the voice of the flight captain, Mr. Richardson, who had been the embodiment of calm and confidence throughout the flight, was heard again in the cabin. His words, addressed to all passengers, became the final note of this magical journey. "Ladies and gentlemen," the captain said with a warm smile, "today we have witnessed how sincere dialogue can overcome any boundaries, how each of us can open up and understand that our differences make us stronger rather than divide us. Let today's flight be a reminder that, despite external circumstances, inside each of us lies the desire to love, understand, and forgive." These words, filled with wisdom and life experience, seemed to penetrate into the very heart of each passenger. Keanu nodded quietly, agreeing with the captain, realizing that today was not just a flight, but an important event that made everyone think about eternal values, about what really matters in this world. As the plane touched down, a quiet silence filled the cabin, a mixture of joy at starting a new chapter in life and the quiet realization that all the trials and tribulations on board had left an indelible mark on people's hearts. Keanu stood up and extended his hand to Margaret as a sign of forgiveness and support, symbolically completing the cycle of change that had begun when his amulet became the subject of controversy and misunderstanding. She accepted his gesture with gratitude, understanding that the most important thing is not external symbols, but an internal willingness to learn, change, and forgive. At LAX, the passengers were greeted by the staff, and everyone who had just taken part in this extraordinary journey already felt like they were part of something bigger. The anticipation in the lounge transformed into a feeling of shared joy from the realization that true unity between people is possible even in the most unpredictable circumstances. Conversations continued. People exchanged contacts, promising each other that this occasion would be the beginning of new encounters, where mutual understanding and respect would become the basis for building strong relationships. Outside the airport, on the streets of Los Angeles, the city greeted a new day full of possibilities and fresh beginnings. Every passerby, every driver and pedestrian seemed to absorb the atmosphere of change, unaware that just a few hours ago, at an altitude of several thousand meters, an event had taken place that could change the fate of people. Keanu Reeves, leaving the airport, looked up at the sky, where the first clouds were already breaking through, a symbol of hope and endless faith in the best. He knew that this day would be the starting point for new stories, where the past gives way to a bright future, and every symbol, every little thing carries a deep meaning and a personal story. This is how this unusual flight ended, not just a flight from one city to another, but a journey to understanding, forgiveness, and a new beginning. Each passenger left a piece of this experience in their souls, a reminder that even in the most difficult situations, you can find light if you only dare to open your heart and trust people who are capable of sincerity and kindness. It was a lesson for everyone who found themselves in this unique story, a lesson that a person's true strength lies in their ability to accept, love, and forgive, despite all the trials of fate. With each new day, with each new glance, the city, the people, and their stories intertwined in an endless symphony of life, where every sound, every moment, every meeting became important notes in a great work called Fate. And in this work, Keanu Reeves forever remained a symbol of hope, wisdom, and unquenchable faith in the best, which is able to overcome any boundaries and unite the hearts of people, despite all the differences and trials that life presents. As Keanu Reeves, Margaret Hensley, and all the passengers left Los Angeles Airport, the story they had lived on board continued to echo in the hearts of each participant. A new day greeted them with bright sunlight, a fresh sea breeze, and a feeling of inexplicable lightness that had just been achieved thanks to sincere dialogue and deep understanding. This epilogue was not just the end of an unusual journey, but a starting point for new paths in life, where the past gave way to bright hope and old prejudices gradually dissolved in the pulsating rhythm of the big city. After meeting the passengers, filled with warmth and awareness of the importance of each personal experience, Keanu decided to spend time in a small cafe located in the historic district of Los Angeles. Here, surrounded by cozy interiors and the aromas of freshly brewed coffee, he wanted to give free rein to his thoughts, comprehend the path he had traveled, and find answers to the questions that were born in his soul during moments of internal crisis. From a table by the window, he watched the life of the streets, hurrying people, chatting passersby, artists playing on the corner, and caught every detail that testified to the fact that each person, like himself, carries a unique story within himself. Margaret, aware of her responsibility for her previous mistakes, could not ignore what had happened either. She felt that this incident had become an important lesson for her personally, and decided to continue her path of reinvention, delving deeper into the issues of human psychology and cultural diversity. Over the next few weeks, she enrolled in courses on emotional intelligence, sincerely wanting to understand how to break down the walls of prejudice and create an atmosphere of acceptance and trust. Her changes did not go unnoticed. Colleagues who had previously been critical began to notice how gently and sensitively Margaret began to approach any difficult situation, trying not to judge, but to understand. This was the beginning of her inner transformation, which promised not only to change the attitude towards herself, but also to influence the entire team. Keanu, for his part, felt that even after such an emotionally charged event, he had a path of self-development to continue. The amulet he had carried with him since childhood took on a new meaning for him, not just a memory of the past, but a symbol of constant movement forward, a reminder that every moment of life deserves to be lived fully and consciously. Meeting Margaret and the open dialogue that took place on board the plane gave him the opportunity to look at his own life from a different angle, to see that a person's strength lies not in their stubbornness, but in their ability to listen and learn from others. This realization prompted him to become more actively involved in community initiatives aimed at developing a culture of mutual understanding and tolerance. Keanu began organizing small meetings and discussions where people from different walks of life could exchange experiences, share their stories, and find common ground. Both heroes, having gone through trials, found themselves at a crossroads of fate, where every meeting and every word had great value. The city, with all its contradictions and amazing moments, became a place of a new beginning for them. Keanu continued to meet people, listening to their stories, and trying to understand how internal experiences can become a bridge between cultures, generations, and beliefs. His initiative not only helped him, but also inspired many to have the courage to be themselves, not be afraid to express their individuality and share their views with others. Margaret, after the conflict and subsequent rethinking, began to actively apply new knowledge in her professional activities. She became a change agent not only for herself, but also for those who faced difficult situations at work on a daily basis. Her example became a motivating factor for many colleagues, forcing them to think about how important it is not only to strictly follow the rules, but also to see living stories, emotions, and personal destinies behind them. Gradually, the atmosphere in her work team began to change. Warm respect and mutual understanding grew out of cold adherence to procedures. Soon, fate brought Keanu and Margaret together again. They met at a charity event dedicated to supporting youth initiatives in the arts and culture. This meeting was symbolic. Two people who had gone through trials and changed forever found themselves united by a common goal: to make the world a little better, a little warmer, opening hearts to new ideas and opportunities. At this event, Keanu gave a short speech in which he spoke about the importance of communication and mutual understanding, about how even in the most difficult situations you can find light and hope. His words, filled with sincerity and faith in the future, found a response in the hearts of those present, and Margaret, who was sitting in the hall, felt that her personal path was gaining new meaning, uniting with the destinies of other people. Thus, the story that began as a random conflict in the narrow space of an airplane grew to a scale capable of touching the souls of many people. In each of its episodes, from the first jolts of tension to a deep dialogue, from painful confessions to sincere forgiveness, universal values were reflected: respect, love, the desire to understand and be understood. Keanu Reeves and Margaret Hensley, having gone through this difficult path, prove that change is possible if only we are ready to look into the eyes of our own weaknesses, admit mistakes, and learn from them. Their fates became a living example of how even a chance meeting filled with sincere emotions can change the course of life, giving people the opportunity to build bridges of trust and mutual support. The epilogue of this story is not the end, but only a new chapter in an endless journey, where every meeting, every word, and every symbol plays its role. Life goes on, opening new horizons for each of us and giving a chance to rethink the deepest values. And perhaps, somewhere on the next flight, in one of the noisy airports, a new story will begin with a simple look, with a quiet word, or, as in our case, with an amulet that will remind us that the true strength of a person is in his ability to love, forgive, and see the light even in the darkest times.